My name is Melissa Wenzel, as many of you probably know. I just want to personally thank you for attending this session. Having a bunch of Minnesotans talk about Minnesota cool things means a lot to me, but the fact that you're here to listen, thank you. How was lunch? Thumbs up? Awesome, great. That is a local company just across the street, actually. So today we're going to have several speakers who I'm going to have them introduce themselves because I'm a little rushed and I don't want to cut into your time. But we have people that are talking about doing activities related to diverting materials for reuse, adaptive reuse of entire buildings, and creating buildings from used building materials. And I'm very proud of the work that they do and glad that they're able to speak with you today.
I fooled you all into thinking she was speaking first. Thank you so much, Melissa. This session came together with so much hard work and honestly this entire conference, like a lot of work from Melissa, so just thank you so much. Just wanted to take a second to say that. Melissa is guru on all things reuse. I mean, my sister and I have learned that, and if you get to know her better, you will too. So I was just going to do a really quick, I'm Allie Lloyd with Lloyd's Construction Services, and I'm going to be speaking today with AWH Architects and Northern Bedrock, and along with my sister Amanda. And the big thing that we just ask is that can we save all questions for the end until after all three of us have spoken? But if you have any questions, we are going to be happy to answer them at the end. So as I said, my name is Allie Lloyd, and this lovely lady here is my sister Amanda Barkey. We are third generation, actually demolition contractors, and we work for Lloyd's Construction Services. It was started over 40 years ago by my father and my grandfather, and the way that our company has always been structured is that we've kind of always had a passion for looking for the value in things that other people don't see value in. And that's something that's been instilled in Amanda and I since we were very young, just to not waste things that don't need to be wasted, and just looking beyond what something is and looking for what its actual potential could be. And as I said, we've been in business for over 40 years. We do demolition, excavation, material management. We operate 2 waste transfer stations in the Southern Metro, and work throughout the entire Midwest, doing our different contracting items. And then we also have a roll-off service that is throughout the Metro. It's the red dumpsters that say Lloyd's on the side. So you may have seen a couple of ours, even just being in town for a short period of time. What we're here to talk about today is the building of our new facility in Shakopee, Minnesota, which is about 30 minutes south of here, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the area. Amanda did on her personal profile page, she put a link to a video where my dad talks about, in her recommended articles, it's a video where he talks about kind of what led our company toward focusing more on reuse and more of a deconstruction approach instead of the standard demolition. And so that's on hers, otherwise on our Facebook page. It's linked there as well. So in about 2018, we outgrew our old headquarters, which was in Savage, which is right next to Shakopee. And we really sat down as a family, and there's the 6 of us on a management team that includes my husband, Amanda's husband, and both of my parents. So we were like very, very much a small family-owned business that's the way we operate. And so we sat down and we came up with goals that for our new headquarters, where we really wanted to showcase that passion that we've had for our entire lives about being able to, being able to reuse things and make them into something new and create beauty from what already exists. We did move to a site. It was a 14-acre site in Shakopee that used to house shingle recycling facility that was owned by the Koch brothers. And they kind of ran out of money after about 25 million and were not able to recycle the oil from the asphalt shingles where they thought they were going to be able to. And so this site that we purchased had a bunch of really small footprint buildings all over the site that presented some really challenging aspects for trying to figure out how we could operate out of there, because we did build a new waste transfer station. So there was one building in particular that we needed to actually touch on to deconstruct, which created our new office in the front of the, excuse me, in the front of the campus, in order to use as much as we possibly could from the building itself. And when we did this, we were actually able to achieve a little over 55% reuse on the materials that went into our new space, which you see some pictures of here. And so what had happened during the course of this was we took a look at not only what we had on site, but at the time that we began building this facility, my grandfather actually had passed away. And so we were cleaning out his pull shed, which housed about 30 or more years of materials that he found value in. A lot of people would look at that pull shed and think hoarder. As his family, we thought, what a great way to have a tribute that was going to last forever to our grandfather. And so we just, like I said, have been taught you use what you have to make something new. Excuse me. And try to make it as classic as possible, try to stay on trend. And we're not looking for what a component is, we're looking for what that component can become. So for example, I think they said there was a laser on this. I'm sorry, yeah, there we go. So if you take a look at right here, this is actually a light fixture that we created in our new space from an old truck tire rim. It was fabbed in our own fab shop. These panels on the back, Amanda's going to talk about a little bit more, but these are reused from another building on site. And you can see up along the edges here, this is soundproofing that we took out of, they were acoustical ceiling panels from a Class A building in downtown Minneapolis that we cut to fit into a custom fabricated ledge of, once again, reused metal that we use throughout the office. And then one of my favorite features in the office is actually, this is our conference room. And this is actually an old Sioux Line rail car that was completely covered with asbestos. And so we abated it and then actually rebuilt it into our conference table that's a counter height, and it's a really beautiful piece, which I do. If any of you guys are in the area and would like a tour, Amanda says you can contact me and I will walk you through. But so there's just, everywhere you look in our office, there are elements of how our team worked together to utilize everything we possibly could in the building of this building. Now, there's some things you're going to see that are obviously new. For example, we had to pour new concrete. We did use Class 5 recycled base underneath the concrete, but we needed new concrete. And we also, with the commercial codes, had to do new windows throughout the space in order to just kind of meet those energy efficiency codes, and just trying to weigh the difference between the reuse and sealing up our building and being able to have it be a nice space for us all to use. But what we did learn in this process, the biggest thing that we learned is that the power that ownership really does have. By owning the building and GCing this ourselves, we were able to make the decisions to take the extra time, look beyond what something was, and spend that money to create a space that was going to be something that our whole team could be proud of. And we had some really great members of our team that Amanda is going to cover next.
So like Allie said, when we acquired this property, there were a lot of random small buildings that just weren't going to work for the use that we had, but because they were so new, it was just upsetting to us to have to demolish them completely. So this was the extraction building that was on site that was used in the attempt to recycle the shingles. And actually, almost the upwards of 90% of that building was reused. So we were able to find industrial partners who needed that equipment and could use it, and took that from us. And another positive about how this building was constructed was that it was bolted together versus welded together. So we had our demolition team, which again was a unique aspect to us, that we had the crews that were able to do it and to say, yes, we want to take the extra time to do this. So we actually labeled all the connecting points A1, A2, and it was almost like a Lego piece that we took apart and put back together again. So the third floor and portions of the second floor are what you're seeing being constructed there. So they took it down, cut it to the height that it needed to be, stripped off those FabCon panels and added them as decorative elements within, and created that space. So the biggest thing that we had to do, which you'll hear from our friends at AWH, is you had to find the right team that was passionate about this as well. So part of our interview process on who we decided who we were working with was making sure that we saw at least a teensy bit of excitement and not pure, are you bleeping crazy look on their face. And I mean, it was everyone from the architect to the structural engineer who was willing to take that risk, because a lot of times that's the biggest thing we're finding as well, that people don't want to recertify these types of things. They were willing to do that for us, which was amazing. And all the way down to the electricians who we said, we really like this timber, can you make it into a light? So just kind of finding the right people to connect was a major success for us, I would say. And then the other main thing that we did, and again unique, is that it was a one-time project that we were building. We tried to look at materials that we had extreme excess quantities of that we could make work. So like a lot of times in a corporate setting, you might have the difficulties that people want a certain standard. We want a reception table to look like this every time, built out of that. There's no way that we could construct this building again because we took specific to that. So being willing to be creative and see what you can make out of it. So one of the examples that you see here that's used in multiple ways, within that building, there was the steel floor grating. So we had them salvage that, but then additionally, we cut it down to different pieces so that it could be a structural component of our center islands that we built. An accent wall to almost look like a cityscape on the back of one of our project manager's offices, and different ways to just use it than what you see it as, not just making steel grating flooring again. So one of the lessons that we learned as we worked on it is we stopped asking people, can we do this? And started asking them, how can we do this? Because people like to say no right away on the first time we would ask them that question. So some of those gears actually on the fireplace came out of the extraction building as well. And that was one of the hurdles that they're like, no, you can't do that. Those are too heavy. That'll never work. I'm not sure that's going to look good. And they got up. So it is possible. It's just having the initiative to keep fighting for it and thinking of using them in different ways. Also in the corner, you can kind of see a chunk of the desk, but one of the other things that we really struggle with and are trying to creatively problem solve on our end too is if you go into an office building, you have these dated desks that people are gonna be like, yeah, we're good. We don't want that kind of look. So by putting new material and skinning it, it was one of those old dated 1980s desks that people think is a legit wood furnished desk that's in there. So these are more components of, and you can see on the end there, that's how the steel grating came together in that final plan table that we have. So it was a lot of creative thinking, a lot of shared Pinterest boards. We created a shared iPhone photo album that people could upload photos to, and we actually had drivers that drive our trucks that would say, hey, I just found this in the dumpster. What do you think of this for a light? Or it was really cool to see once it gained momentum. Allie, tell me, how do I get it to point? Oh, okay. And even these things were reused oil filters that we just painted. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the materials. It's just kind of thinking creatively. And especially when you get to the point of it being a giant space, that's where AWH can come in and make some really great adaptive reuse, which they're going to talk about next.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Hecker with AWH Architects. We're a Minneapolis-based firm that specializes in adaptive reuse and historic preservation and community center design. And I apologize in advance, we have most of this written because as architects, we're super prepared and on time. And on budget. That was, who laughed at it? That's good. Okay, let's go here. That's that part. Okay. At AWH, we believe deconstruction and reuse aren't just design strategies, they're essential tools for honoring embodied energy, which I realize I'm not supposed to use that word anymore, supporting equitable development and telling, thank you very much, and telling a more complete story of place. We relish in the opportunity to take on projects that require creative interpretation of not only the potential of the existing structure, but also codes and standards that make up the framework for reuse. This afternoon, we'll share a few projects that showcase how we put those values into action. Starting with one of our detail-oriented undertakings, The Guardian, which is just down the street, and John Green will speak about that. I'm only 18 seconds behind.
Thanks, Alex. My name is John Green. I'm a senior project manager with AWH. Almost my 10-year anniversary.
That's right.
It was just the two of us at the beginning. It's been a fun road. The Guardian building project, like Alex said, it's about 5 blocks away. It was originally the Merchants National Bank, built in 1892. It was part of the Westward Railroad expansion. James J. Hill was a trustee for this bank, and built in the Richardsonian Romanesque style, really beautiful, stout building. Interesting thing is the structure was the lone holdout on the block in the early 80s when the Gaultier Plaza was built. So it's basically St. Paul's little version of the house in Up. They resisted, and this building has had a legacy of preservation, of saving and not destroying what is in this community, what is in this building, its cultural significance, in a part of town that really has retained some really valuable historic buildings that you don't see elsewhere where they did exist at one point. So our client approached us when he's a lawyer and a piece of the parapet had fallen off and hit someone in the head. They weren't injured, but they told him about it, and being the good lawyer that he is, he immediately contacted a masonry company. They reached out to us as the project was expanding in scope, the classic scope creep, and we as a team started diving into what was needed at this building to add decades more onto its lifespan, and then figure out what is the goal for how much do we do, what is the impact of doing that immediately and throughout the time of the building. So one big thing that we focused on immediately was masonry restoration, and we really wanted to retain the grandeur of this structure. So this part of it is a preservation project. Other parts that we'll look at in this project are rehab, and we're kind of thinking the National Park Service's definitions of historic treatments of properties. So there are many different ways you can go about that, and that's one theme that you'll see in our work is each specific building, each property needs to be considered by itself and what is needed. And some can have many different aspects. So one of the first things that we discovered, if you could jump back to that slide.
Just trying to keep you on time here.
Yep. So the image in the middle is when we got involved in the project. If you look at that historic photo, you can notice there's a difference in the parapet. That historic photo was the only documentation of the more or less original condition of the building. That was 1912, built in 1892. At some point, that decorative parapet was removed. So one component of the project goals was to reconstruct the parapet, and all we had was that image. So talking about how important it is to have teams that are working together to figure out how you can cross that bridge. This was stonemasons. So there's Architrave is the name of the company. They're local. They do work all over the country. They're amazing. They use traditional stone carving methods. And together we figured out a way to use perspective correction on that photo to figure out dimensions and referencing existing details. Richardsonian Romanesque style has a lot of kind of repeating motifs. So you could look at, there was a detail on an interior handrail that led us to figure out what one of the key details in the reconstructed parapet was going to be. So we worked closely also with authorities having jurisdiction. This is a tax credit project. We're working with SHPO, we're working with National Park Service, City of St. Paul, Heritage Preservation Commission, with the shared goal of maintaining this building as a piece of the local cultural landscape, the built environment, and as that very cool little relic of the 80s development that happened on the property. Can you pop on to the next one? And before I talk about this, what you were seeing there, we created that parapet with cast stone. So we looked for stone that would match the original. The only place we could find it was buried on the University of Michigan campus. They had torn down a building and just buried it. And that was from the same quarry as this stone, but it was too deteriorated. There was no way we could use it. It's a soft stone. Another component of our reuse strategies is looking at how we can bring things up to modern use and modern responsibilities with energy use. So with this structure, we had a unique opportunity to install the first biosolar roof in the country. So it's basically a green roof and solar PV array that work together so that the ballast is the green roof. As part of the project in the rehab, can you go to the next one? We did a lot of interior upgrades too. So this is the rehab component. We're not making it look like an 1892 bank. So climate control, outdated HVAC systems. We put new rooftop units on, and that green roof system lowers the ambient air temperature to the degree at the warmest, the most cooling demand months of the summer. They're about 40% more efficient. So we track this data too, and that's one thing that was really important as we're trying these strategies for improving the energy performance of historic buildings. Lots of limitations. There's lots of guessing. They're educated guesses. If we have that data, we can do it better the next time. There were some other components that revealed themselves. One big thing was we cut a hole through 2 stories of the building, introducing light, creating opportunities for circulation, vertical circulation, whereas everyone had been using the elevator before, cross-pollination. This is an environment that has nonprofits and the law firm itself that focuses on protecting victims of childhood abuse. In summary, this was a very complex project, starting on the outside, moving to the inside, and it revealed itself continually until completion and beyond. And we continue to learn from this one.
Well, and most important, it's now home to advocacy groups protecting children and the environment. Hence its name, The Guardian, received LEED Gold certification in the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Award, and has become a landmark once again, we argue. All right. So now we're gonna do more little rapid fire session. We have worked on a lot of adaptive reuse historic preservation projects, over 100 since we started in 2011. And this is the adaptive reuse of the old historic high school in Duluth. It's called the Zenith now. It was originally built in 1892. We partnered with Saturday Properties, a local apartment developer, and transformed this vastly underutilized redstone castle on the hill into 122 modern apartments, which is now 92% occupied after opening about a year ago. The bell tower, which you see here, is a celebrated landmark, which we've did a little restoration, but also on the inside, we just left it the way it was, and it had all the signatures of everybody who'd ever graduated from the high school on the inside walls, which is really cool. This project met or followed the historic guidelines. We retained the intricate masonry and original floor plates while weaving in energy efficient systems and contemporary amenities. One of the major challenges was the project was building MEP upgrades. There was no mechanical system. We had to route the ductwork through the historic corridors, but had to retain the existing volume of the corridors through the NBA National Park Service standards, or perceived standards. I could argue about that. After careful research and field observation, the team put together an argument, which is this section, which you can hardly see, but basically got a drop ceiling in there, used all these existing openings and masonry openings to sort of weave this complicated, pretty efficient mechanical system into it. So that's that. Next building, this is the Thorpe building in Northeast Minneapolis. It's a 200,000 square foot industrial complex where the Norton bomb site was in World War II. Actually had a train that used to drive into the building. We've worked with this owner for over a decade. When he first got the building, it was about 25% occupied. And we've gone through this sort of phased adaptive reuse strategy over the last decade to upgrade life safety systems and corridors, exiting, and then doing a lot of design-specific fit plans for like brick media, all while respecting the history of the property and actually really bringing it back. There was clear stories and that train that came in, all those things that we found that we sort of reinvigorated. And now it's, I think, 98% occupied. So now, the warehouse district, this is an area in Minneapolis, the North Loop, which maybe some of you guys know. We've done about a dozen projects in the warehouse district, and we have a lot of, well, just a lot of projects there. So, but the Hewing Hotel, which is the upper left-hand one, that was one of the first ones we did. Well, actually, the Maytag was the first one, which is the second image there. We teamed with Imperium Hotel Group out of Chicago to do the Hewing Hotel. We retained the heavy timber frame, the historic masonry, the structural bones, all while integrating new MEP and egress systems, and a rooftop amenity, which was the if you guys have ever been to the rooftop, or haven't, if you guys are from out of town, you should go to the rooftop bar there. We were actually building that while the Park Service was arguing that we should not be building a 6-story addition on this historic building. But we just showed them pro formas and budgets and like, this is what this hotel needs. Plus the view is amazing. And now Maytag, which was one of John's first buildings that he worked on, he'll talk about.
We look some time here.
2 more minutes.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's the Hewing that Alex was talking about. View of the rooftop there. Notice you can't see it from the street. That's a key part of adaptive reuse, especially in the historic entitlement process. View corridors, which is a very important consideration. This is the Maytag building. This building was very interesting because it was built for the Maytag company. They built it in 1916 before they made appliances. They were manufacturing farm implements and also tractors. So the structure has a 200 PSF capacity, which is a very, very stout building because they had a massive freight elevator. They would put tractors and farm implements, move them all around the building. That created a lot of great opportunities, a lot of challenges for if you want to cut a hole in the floor. So with a lot of these projects, especially warehouse district type projects, life safety, meeting egress is a challenge. There's one stair, you need to have 2 stairs. Modernizing some of these components. So here, we didn't want to destroy even part of these floor plates to put a new stair inside. So we found a path to do a stair addition on the exterior. And it was a light touch, designed and detailed so that the next life of the building that could be removed and have a very, very little impact, fastening through mortar joints, for example, kind of the boilerplate standards and things that we should be doing in these projects. We also restored all of the original wood windows on the primary facade and about 70% of the hot rolled steel windows. So that's a theme that we're seeing when we run through all these projects that are more utilitarian structures with adapting specific to the opportunities that exist on that property, like the Lloyd's team was saying. So I'll pass it off here and look forward to any questions that you have.
Thank you. Oh. Okay. We're good. I'll just chat.
There you go.
That's okay. Pardon me. My slides apparently didn't make it, but give me 1 second. I'll pull them up and chat. While I do this, my name is Charlie Legowski. I'm good. Okay. I'm the executive director at Northern Bedrock Historic Preservation Corps in Duluth, Minnesota. We are a workforce development program that primarily focuses on preservation trades training, windows, masonry, cemetery restoration, log structure maintenance, cedar shakes, and shingles. We service the state of Minnesota in addition to Wisconsin and the UP. Usually when I'm asked to speak at things like this, I get asked how I get young people excited about joining preservation trades. And to that is I put very little effort into it. We received 300 applications this past year for 22 spots. Not Indeed applications. Those are, they physically leave Indeed, go to our website and apply through our human management portal. And we do that in part because we use our young folks as a litmus test for how we describe ourselves. So we're connecting with things young folks are learning about in their schools or on the internet or TikTok, and we're using that in our materials. Notions like right to repair has become very popular. Rural settings and not having access to some of the things we need to maintain these structures in rural sites has become a big one. Folks have found cemeteries and churches and historic schools they love outside of the urban area, and no one is available to care for them, so they want to learn how to do it themselves. The other big one we've heard is, I'm only ever going to be able to afford a home that probably needs a lot of work, and I'm not going to be able to pay for it, so how can I do it on my own? And to that is, thankfully, there's a lot of new organizations that are popping up that are here and ready to do that for us. So we manage about 30 young adults over 47 projects across the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP. Excuse me, this week we are at Scandia, Minnesota, working on a hewn and dovetail log structure that had an HVAC inappropriately put in the 90s, and there's a lot of mold that has grown. So we've worked on removing the sheathing, and next week we'll come back and repair a big portion of the logs that have had some water damage to it, using Dutchman repair, if you're familiar, which is splicing in repairs and using as most original material as we can. We also this week are in the UP doing work at Norway Lake, working on tail log ends. Very small projects in scope, but we are the only people out here doing it. Of our 227 project sites we've been on since 2011, 201 of them have been entirely volunteer managed, meaning they have no one paid on site to take care of them, raise funds for them, project management for them, or do the research, which is why our project onboarding takes about 3 to 5 years. We're with people from the moment they want to start caring about their building in a preservation and or adaptive reuse way, which is a really exciting place to be, but it is a lot of hand-holding to get there. Which leads us into what previous folks have talked about is values-based preservation versus like capital historic preservation, Section 106, National Park Service things. Because we're small and nimble, we can delineate some of that, and we can use a values-based model to make decisions that make sense for preservation, but also make sense for the building owners. And aside from buildings that are registered or need Section 106 compliance, we can have a little more autonomy with how we approach projects. That being said, we usually use the best practices and standards set out by the National Park Service. We just do it in a way that makes it seem like the right answer and not the compliance or regulatory answer to a project. Aside from our preservation trades training program, We have an office in Duluth. If you ever want to see a prairie-style building cast entirely in poured concrete, come check out our building in West Duluth. It is in the Morgan Park neighborhood, which is the U.S. Steel's first company town. So we recently bought a 25,000 square foot on 5 acres warehouse that housed the electricians and the boiler makers and the Model Ts and all of the things that kept Morgan Park up and running, which we're converting into our training facility. So us, in addition to with the folk school, the wood turners, and a couple other key partners in Duluth, are developing a one-stop training facility in Duluth for a workforce development model, focusing primarily on preservation trades, in addition to craft as well. In addition to that building, we manage Halfway Ranger Station Historic District, which is a 17-structure, 22-acre historic district on the South Kawashui River outside of Ely, Minnesota. It's one of the entrances to the Boundary Waters. There we have buildings that are Adirondack style, timber framed, balloon framed, wood siding, shakes and cedar shingles, and that's kind of our training playground. We operate it in a way that if projects don't get done, that's okay. Our primary focus is training. If we break glass, totally cool. We have another window we can plug in. If the roof doesn't get done, we can come back and do it in a couple of weeks. It's not someone's home. It's not a lived-in structure like this where we have to keep some of those deadlines in mind, which if you work with young adults is incredibly important. We're teaching brand new skills that in no short amount of time has been lost. In a couple generations, we've lost these skills. Excuse me. And with that, learning new skills, it's incredibly anxious. Coming out of COVID, that's also incredibly anxiety inducing for a lot of folks. We create a safe space and work on becoming an employable young adult in a way that really resonates with folks most of the time. Granted, we are a very intense program, so it's not the right fit for everyone, but we try and become the right fit for most. Primarily our demographics, if this can stay in this room, is actually new Americans, primarily refugees, who have come to this country from war-torn countries of their own, but they are looking at structures in their refugee communities that they want to maintain. With that, we've lost a lot of federal funding in the last couple of months. We are navigating that as we speak. But so we're really looking at a group of people that for the first time, more or less in Minnesota's history, they are preserving structures that were not built for their ethnic group. And what does that mean on a very grand scale? And what does that mean for funding? And what does that mean for everything else that goes into it? And what we're learning is, you know, there's a lot of feelings that come up with things like that. And there's not a ton of funding. So how can we create resilient communities that can maintain these buildings kind of outside of a structure of the state or the federal government has become important to us. The other big thing we're working on is building our programming so you don't have to commit to us for a full year. We recently got funding to open two tool lending libraries and develop our workshops across the state of Minnesota. So stay tuned for some certificate-based training on window restoration, masonry restoration, and a few other things we're excited to announce shortly. There's probably something I missed, but I think that's it for now. We can open the floor for questions. Yeah.
Sorry, as part of your training certification process, is deconstruction on there anymore?
We're hoping to move to a deconstruction model. We had a big grant from the EPA to do that. We have since lost the big grant. But one of the reasons we bought the building was because there's a huge drive-in basement level that we want to open a salvage store out of eventually. Yeah. Any other questions? For not just me.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out like easy ways or easy things to put into our building specifications as an architect that can promote building reuse or I guess just add to it. And I know every building is different, but are there like 5 main things that anybody can include in any building spec for architecture? It's a big question. Why not?
In the spec book?
Yeah. Like earlier, it was mentioned bolting instead of welding steel, so that was a strategy that I wrote down, for example.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the open plan concept, I don't think.
John's a spec writer, so he can talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. open plan, which is a concept about designing buildings to be reused for new uses down the line. It's like the bolted steel or, egress cores and things like that aren't, it's just not so specific to a certain program that it, can't be adaptively reused, although I would argue anything can. I guess, I don't know, what else do you think, John?
Yeah, I think there are some other components where project teams can be resistant to change and look at that as something that is too burdensome. And the way we always do it is what we're really comfortable with. So there's a degree of risk there. Getting the project team on the same plane is a really key thing. And that starts with your client. And then supporting the process through detailing, which we have found bolted connections. Actually, we've done a handful of projects. We have a handful of new construction projects where we only use bolted connections, partially because of the potential for deconstruction and reuse. But then also, if you look at how it can aid speed of construction and what happens in a fabricator shop versus in the field, you can, if you're having those conversations before it's going out to bid, if it's a hard bid project, you can kind of set that expectation up better in your spec and in the project manual and in the CDs, in the construction documents. Another thing that we've done is just rely on programs and spec that's already out there. So if we're not doing a Living Building Challenge certified project or a LEED certified project, there's language in the spec for that type of project that we can use. So not thinking exclusively, are we on this pathway, we're not going to certification. That has helped us to kind of tell the story a little bit better, especially on the trade side, where people have worked on projects like that and they kind of understand what the goal is. But being on the same plane with the goal is really key.
Like using a spec section from a building that was LFA or like.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a construction waste management plan, it's like division 1.0 something. And so we just always put that in the spec, and then sure enough, a bidder will be like, oh, I didn't see that part. I'm like, well, that's too bad.
It's in there.
It's in there.
I feel like too, from not the beautiful structures that they work on sometimes when you're stuck with a 1990s building or we're in a Class A office building, I feel like the easiest ones you see that can be a win-win for the owner because it's going to save them money is acoustical ceiling tile. Those are really easy to pop out and put back in, and you're very infrequently going to be looking and studying the ceiling. It's a component you need, but if it's good enough to clean up and save, that's a big one that our crews typically will salvage on a project. And doors and frames are another one that are, as long as you've prepared for them to know your openings and can have your architect draw those exact openings in. That one takes a little bit more work, but another easy one that they might not be as passionate about a certain look of it.
Well, and you should mention insulation bars too. I can't really notice that. So like when you have like panels that have, okay, there's a microphone, hi. Just haven't spoken for so long. One that is from a demolition aspect that is really, really difficult to reuse, recycle, anything like that is built-in insulation in the core of a panel. And there's a lot of like energy efficient things that it's really great that you're getting an energy efficient building, but you're not creating something that can be reused ever or even recycled. And it's just creating waste. And so I would say thinking about things like that, where you're building things in that are essentially just ruining the raw materials. And I would even go as far as to say spray-in insulation is something that is going to just, it's going to work really great when you're in a pinch, and it's going to be the easy thing to, it's the easy button, but it's not easy to deal with. So.
Another question down that same line. So, you guys have religion here, and you're on the construction and deconstruction or demolition side, and you're on the design side of this. Beyond having a willing client that wants reuse and these values brought into a project, because these are not low bid. projects, how do you market this to your clients? Because if the architects don't get it, it's not going to happen. If they don't spec the materials, it's not going to happen. So what do you bring to this space that your competitors don't in terms of marketing the possibilities?
Yeah. One component of that is we offer traditional architectural services. We also do historic consulting, and that allows us to navigate the nuances of any given project from pre-contract. You know, we're having initial discussions with a potential client, and we are willing, whether it's a really good or a bad thing, depending on the case, to really get outside of the traditional boundaries and be part of things like the process of purchasing a building and assessing what could be done before a client makes a purchase, comes to us, wants to use historic tax credits or, you know, leverage certain mechanisms to make the project happen, and then they realize that it's impossible to do what they want to do there. So just advising kind of early stage concept level is a key thing. And beyond that, just being sensitive to the welcoming the challenges that we encounter. Of one of those challenges is establishing the meaning of value on any project and getting on the same page with the whole project team early on to say, you know, some of these projects were lowest bid projects, and we need to develop a set of documents, contract documents for that type of project that are very focused on what the true goals are in the project. That many times can actually mean a lighter touch, and that can go against some preconceptions that the project team had at the beginning. So I think in summary, it's really just that early involvement in projects and getting on the same page about how you can get to that goal. And usually through that process, the goal shifts a little bit.
I mean, we do use the carrot and stick method a little bit. You know, we are historic consultants, so we can bring these tax credits and legacy funds, combine those two. So it's a lot of like just, you know, carrot types of things, but also, I mean, I have gilted boards and saying the embodied energy in this is worth 1 million gallons of gas, and do you really want to throw that away? And, you know, things like that they're like, oh, well, I don't really, you know. So that's maybe not a marketing strategy, but it's been used.
And we're on the opposite end of that. We do work in low bid. The majority of our work is low bid. And what we have to rely on when we're not doing something that we had full control over, like this instance, is that we tend to market with like resale value. And like we've been playing around recently with a commission-based program. But for the most part, really, we're kind of more so doing it under like almost, we're claiming not only all the scrap, but anything that we see of value that they want to throw away. And then we take it upon ourselves. And so we take the risk for that resale so that we can still keep our bid low without really affecting the owner, is where we found the most success with this, is that we're not affecting their budget, we're not affecting their timeline, and we're not affecting,
And argue they're saving money on a disposal time. If you don't get rid of that, you're actually saving money on the disposal.
Here's another 30-yard box. Here's and so we actually do include that in our material when we send to them saying, hey, we would like to grab this stuff. And it's the biggest hurdle we see is getting them to then, when you see value, to relinquish control of that stuff. Because suddenly now there's value to it. And we're like, well, that was in our bid. So. Yeah.
That to, like, do you know or do you remember when the I don't know if you can share that, what was like the amount in dollars that the clients were able to save, like, work on estimate or versus the traditional project?
Do you have a number your clients can save or make off of reselling salvage materials or reusing salvage materials?
You know, it varies. You've seen one. My My grandpa's favorite line used to be when somebody would be like, how many dumpsters do I need to tear down this house? He'd be like, how much do I weigh? And they were on the phone. So that's kind of, it has a lot more to do with just, you figure it out as you go. And we've got 30 years into doing this. And so we're seeing that value from that. Does that kind of answer what you're saying? Probably not. It's not a great answer.
But I think what we've all kind of been saying is there's not really like a central policy or a central philosophy to any of this. It's, you know, your clients the best, you know, your relationships with your partners the best. How can you use what you're passionate about and what your values are to make that pathway for yourself? And if it is a dollar amount at the end of the day, maybe you can't give them a true dollar amount, but you can spec out other projects you've done. And like, this is kind of similar, we can do it this way. But this kind of work is never going to work if we standardize this system too much, because each building is very unique. Each goal we have is very unique, and we're all bringing very different things to the table. So the more we can resist compliance and regulation on some of this stuff, the easier the project model becomes. Yeah.
But I guess a good thumb, like where we've worked on in the past, is we've been able to kind of push people toward, like, we keep 80% of what we sold something for, and then we'll give like a 20% commission back, is probably the closest I can get to a number on. And a lot of that, knowing what you can sell it for, comes from building relationships with different contractors who are going to be able to reuse it, but also, I mean, just tools that anybody can use, like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, things like that. We've also had a lot of really good luck with.
Any other questions, comments? Yeah.
All right. Insulation.
Insulation.
Solution. I mean, it's, you know, yep, you know, green roofs are great, but other than, you know, how are you gonna, you gotta throw it away.
Yep.
So what's the best product to throw away? Or what's the best way around having to use your typical insulation?
Well, the best insulation out there is rock wool. I mean, hands down. It's recycled, it's recyclable, it's fireproof, it's easy to handle. Although in our market, upper Midwest, they deal with bad insulation and fiberglass. And I mean, you basically had to threaten the contractor to put rock wool in the project. I mean, finger chopping kind of threatening.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah.
And then thinking about specification too of, you know, are you doing faced or unfaced? And if you like the primary material, what it's giving, which in this case is stone wool, mineral wool. There's a lot of products out there that add performance by facing and adding other layers, which then can be more challenging. And from a waste stream standpoint, you know, similar to doing a closed cell all over a structure. Now you have this thing that never comes apart unless you just rip it apart and then it's destroyed.
Any other?
Any final remarks?
All right.
Thank you.
Well, let's give a round of applause to these speakers today.